They didn't just abandon me, they erased me at their dinner table beneath crystal chandeliers and veiled smiles. My father called me a disappointment. My husband handed me divorce papers like a napkin, and my brother, he smirked while signing my termination letter. They thought I was finished, but I didn't scream, I didn't fight, I disappeared into silence, into shadows. What they didn't know was that I had already planned for betrayal. While they sharpened their knives, I was building my escape. This isn't a story about revenge, it's about survival, and the quiet kind of wild war no one sees coming. The driveway was longer than she remembered. The gravel crunched beneath her tyres with a kind of precision that annoyed her. Even the stones here were perfectly arranged, like everything else her father touched. Miranda Hale, 42, corporate strategist, builder of systems and silence, pulled up to the ancestral estate she'd avoided for 3 years. The house loomed, all red brick and white columns, like it was trying too hard to impress someone. Probably itself. The porch light flickered on as she approached, automatic, not welcoming. Inside, the house breathed cold air and polished ambition. Her heels clicked against the marble foyer, each step echoing down memory-soaked halls. In the dining room, the chandelier sparkled like judgment. Her father sat at the head, stiff-backed and godlike. Patrick Hale didn't age. He calcified. His grey hair was perfectly parted, suit pressed even at dinner. At his right was Colby, her younger brother, already 2 bourbons in, laughing at some half-told anecdote no one cared about. And across the table, Marlon, her husband, soon to be not. He didn't look at her as she entered. None of them did. Miranda smoothed her jacket, kept her chin up, and took the empty seat nearest the end of the table. She didn't say a word. The staff emerged like clockwork, placing lamb with rosemary glaze and heirloom carrots on bone-white china. Someone refilled her glass without asking. The conversation hummed on, all stock prices and mergers, like her presence was optional background noise. She chewed, she swallowed, she waited, and then Patrick cleared his throat. The sound was surgical. "Before dessert," he said, folding his hands, "we have a matter to address." Miranda's fork paused mid-air. The room dropped a degree colder. Patrick didn't look at her, not directly. "As of this afternoon, the board and I have agreed that your role at Hale Strategic is no longer aligned with the company's forward direction." She blinked. 1 second, 2. "You're terminating me," she said flatly. Patrick nodded. "The firm requires adaptive leadership, strength." Colby sipped his bourbon and added with a smirk, "Not everyone's cut out for pressure." Miranda didn't respond. Her jaw was tight enough to crack. "Of course," Patrick went on, as if he were firing an intern. "We wish you well in your next chapter." Miranda looked around the table. No one spoke. Her mother focused on slicing her lamb. Colby was grinning. And Marlon reached into his briefcase and pulled out a crisp envelope. He set it on her plate. "I'll be moving out tonight," he said, not looking at her. "This has been overdue." Miranda didn't open it. She didn't have to. The words were practically bleeding through the paper. "Divorce." Her pulse pounded, her skin flushed hot then cold, and still she said nothing. Across the table, Marlon leaned back and folded his napkin neatly. "There's someone else," he said. "We've been seeing each other for a while now. You were always busy, Miranda. Absent." The lamb on her plate steamed. Her wine remained untouched. Patrick didn't flinch. Colby raised his glass. "To new beginnings," he said, smiling. Miranda stood, slowly, gracefully. The old wood floor creaked beneath her weight. She took her napkin, folded it, and set it beside the untouched envelope. Then she looked each one of them in the eye. Not with anger, not with sadness, with clarity. "Thank you," she said, voice calm, "for the clarity." Colby chuckled. "That's it? No yelling, no throwing wine in his face." "I don't perform for free," she replied, already turning. As she walked out of the room, no one stopped her. No one followed. Outside, the air was thick and humid. A storm was gathering somewhere beyond the horizon. Miranda didn't look back. Rain had started to fall by the time Miranda reached the highway. Not a gentle drizzle, but a steady, determined downpour that blurred the lights and smeared the world into streaks of grey and gold. Her wipers sliced through the water in rhythmic defiance, but the road ahead still looked like a dream she wasn't sure she wanted to return to. She didn't cry, she didn't scream. Her face remained impassive as the taillights of Charleston disappeared in her rearview mirror. The silence inside the car was thicker than the storm outside. She drove without thinking, letting muscle memory take over, turns she hadn't made in years, roads not listed on GPS anymore. The sea wasn't far. It never was. Not for her. The old coastal road twisted through pine and palm until the darkness finally broke into open space. There it was, a narrow path hidden between two dune ridges. Most people missed it entirely. Miranda didn't. She pulled up to a wrought iron gate, rusted from sea air but still solid. Her hand hovered over the keypad before punching in a 6-digit code no one else alive knew. The gate creaked open like a secret reluctantly shared. The house came into view in the next moment, a modern structure tucked beneath wild palms and dune grass. Not large, not flashy, but deliberate. All clean lines and dark wood, glass facing the Atlantic like it needed to witness the tide every day just to remember its place. Miranda parked under the small overhang and stepped out. Rain soaked her instantly, but she didn't flinch. She moved with purpose now. No suitcase, just her leather bag and the weight of tonight crashing behind her. Inside, the air was dry, still carrying the faint scent of cedar and salt. Nothing had changed. No photos on the walls, no signs of life except the low hum of the security system reactivating. She locked the door behind her and stood for a moment, drenched, listening. The sea murmured beyond the windows, that was all. She walked to the living room, peeled off her wet blazer and dropped it on the back of a chair. Then she moved to the desk, a built-in oak piece that looked decorative to most, but she knew better. She knelt beside it, reached underneath and pressed a nearly invisible latch. Click. A narrow panel slid open. Behind it, a shallow compartment lined with felt. Inside were 2 items, a slim envelope and a matte black USB drive. She reached for them with steady hands, though her breath hitched as her fingers touched the paper. The envelope held notarized documents, ownership transfers, licensing agreements, non-disclosure contracts. Her company, the one no one in her family knew about. Built piece by piece over 7 years, using every lesson they thought she didn't learn. The USB drive, the proprietary software, the real heart of the infrastructure project, her brother was parading around as his own. She hadn't handed it over when they asked. She never intended to. She stared at them both under the soft light. For the first time since the dinner table implosion, her chest rose with something other than restraint. Not relief, not victory. Hope. Not the kind you speak aloud, but the kind you feel like a tremor just beneath your ribs. The kind that whispers, they don't own all of you. Not yet. Miranda stood, set the documents on the desk, and looked out at the ocean. The rain had lightened, now more of a mist. The moon was hiding, but the tide was full. She exhaled, slow and steady. Tonight had stripped her bare, but this house, this place, had always been a beginning, not an end. The rain had faded to a whisper when the knock came. Miranda had just begun to change into dry clothes, old sweatpants, and a long-sleeve tee that smelled faintly of lavender. She paused, listening. Another knock, firmer this time. Not frantic, not hesitant, just deliberate. She moved towards the door barefoot, heart beating steadily but harder than before. No one was supposed to know she was here, not even... When she opened it, a woman brushed past her without invitation, hair wet and pulled into a loose twist, flat squeaking against the hardwood floor. In her hand, a cardboard tray held 2 coffees. Tucked beneath her arm, a thick red folder sealed with a plastic band. Thought you'd either show up here or end up setting fire to your father's wine cellar, she said, kicking off her shoes without looking up. Miranda blinked once. Eva. Obviously, Eva replied, placing the coffees on the kitchen island and setting the folder down with more weight than necessary. It's 3:15 in the morning. That means it's time for bad coffee and worse decisions. Despite herself, Miranda let out a soft breath that might have been the ghost of a laugh. You tracked me. I saw the security alert ping from the beach property. I got access to your perimeter system, remember? She handed Miranda a cup. Relax, no one else has that login. Miranda took the coffee, wrapped her fingers around it like it might tether her to something real. You shouldn't have come. Of course I should have. Ava leaned back against the counter. Besides, I brought proof that your family's about to implode. I figured that's worth a drive in the rain. The house filled with silence again. The good kind. The kind Miranda hadn't heard in a long time. Ava nodded towards the red folder. Go on, open it. Miranda did, slowly, flipping back the cover. Inside were copies of contracts, scanned emails, a few printed text exchanges, and at the centre of it, a summary page with a highlighted paragraph. She read it once, then again, and again. You're sure? She asked, voice barely above a whisper. Ava took a sip of her coffee and nodded. The software core, the one your brother renamed and is pitching like his own. You never signed over the final licensing. You still hold the core encryption rights. That one clause you buried in the sub-license agreement, that saved everything. Miranda sat down on the edge of a stool, coffee forgotten. They can't use it legally, Ava continued. Not without exposure, not without risk. And with the way Colby's flaunting it in the media, it's only a matter of time before someone asks the right questions. Miranda let her fingers rest on the edge of the folder, steadying herself. It's the only reason I didn't burn the place down, she murmured. Ava studied her. They think you're done. They think you left the game. I did leave, Miranda said. I didn't walk, I disappeared. Good, Ava replied. Let them think you've vanished. Miranda looked up. Ava stepped forward, resting her palms on the counter. I've watched them circle like vultures since the board vote. Colby's in way over his head. Patrick's trying to clean house but doesn't know what's missing yet. They didn't just cut you out, Miranda. They tried to erase you, and now they're building an empire on sand. Silence again. Then, almost absently, Miranda whispered, So we let them build. Exactly, Ava said. Let them get comfortable. Let them think the throne's theirs. Miranda picked up her coffee, took a long sip. It had cooled slightly, but she didn't mind. She stood and walked to the window. The ocean beyond was still obscured by mist, but the faint reflection of the moon on wet sand flickered in the distance. The house was quiet around her, but the idea in her mind was loud now, sharpening. They always said I was too reserved, she said, too quiet, that I didn't know how to take up space. Eva came to stand beside her. They mistook silence for weakness. Miranda didn't speak for a while. Her reflection in the glass stared back, older than the one they remembered, maybe harder, but still here. Finally, she said, If we're going to do this, I need to be invisible. I'll handle the firewall, Eva said. Multiple shells. The IP will route through 3 custodians. No trace. And the trust? Still protected. Your name's off everything already. The property, the tech, the holding group, it's all clean. Miranda turned from the window. Then we wait. Eva smiled, small and sharp. And while they dig their own graves, you start writing the eulogy. By morning, Miranda had already made a list. It wasn't written on paper or typed in any digital file. It lived in her mind, precise, methodical, a quiet map of erasure. This wasn't about hiding, it was about reclaiming control. She moved through the house in a steady rhythm, like the tide pulling back before a wave. The first step, digital silence. She sat at her desk and opened her laptop, fingers moving faster than hesitation. Her LinkedIn profile was the first to go. Years of experience, endorsements, polished headshots, glowing recommendations, all gone in less than 3 minutes. Her bio disappeared into nothingness, like she'd never existed in the corporate world at all. Next was her professional email, an account she'd used since her earliest consulting days. She archived what mattered, encrypted it, then initiated a permanent deletion process. When prompted with, "Are you sure?" she clicked yes without blinking. Her Facebook was already inactive. Twitter had been private for months. She deleted those too. With each deletion, it was like shedding another layer of who they thought she was. Then came the financials. Eva returned mid-morning, hair tied back, no makeup, coffee in hand, tablet under one arm. "You started without me," she said, eyeing the stack of folders on the table. "I didn't sleep," Miranda replied simply. "Didn't think you would." Together they moved through the next phase like surgeons. Miranda closed all personal bank accounts, rerouting balances through a nested set of holding companies that Eva had prepared. Everything, stocks, bonds, retirement, now sat beneath the protective umbrella of a trust established 6 years earlier under an alias she hadn't touched in years. Twist 5 wasn't a twist to Miranda. It was a plan long in motion. Back when her father first hinted at succession plans that excluded her. Back when Colby began showing up to board meetings with polished pitches that borrowed too heavily from her private reports. Miranda had known. She'd seen the signs. Passive-aggressive edits to her strategy documents, meetings rescheduled without notice, the casual way Patrick dismissed her proposals with a vague, "We'll revisit this later." She hadn't fought them then. She'd fortified instead. Eva pulled up a document on her tablet, a scanned notarization from 4 years ago. "This," she said, turning the screen to Miranda, "is the clause that saved your patents. You filed it under Hale Futures, but transferred ownership rights within 90 days to a shell that reported to your trust." Miranda nodded. "They thought they took everything." "They took what you showed them," Eva corrected. Miranda let that sit for a moment. "And now they're trying to sell what they don't even own." "Legally, they're exposed," Eva said. "They just don't know it yet." Miranda leaned back in her chair. She didn't smile, not exactly, but the lines at the corners of her mouth softened for the first time since Charleston. It wasn't revenge that warmed her. It was clarity. She moved to the living room, carrying a folder marked Legacy. Inside were scanned copies of early design notes, NDA logs, timestamps and emails, all showing she was the original architect of the system Colby had renamed, all dated, all secured. Miranda set the folder on the table. "This is the firewall," she said. "Anything happens, this goes public." Eva tilted her head. "You sure you want to go nuclear?" "I'm not lighting the fuse," Miranda said. "I'm just making sure they know it's there." They worked in silence for hours, fine-tuning layers of security, encrypting files, creating blind custodians for legal and IP ownership. Miranda's life, what was left of it, now existed in airtight compartments, far from the reach of her family's lawyers or auditors. By late afternoon, Miranda stood at the edge of the back deck, the wind from the sea tousling her hair. She closed her eyes and breathed. Not peace, not yet, but progress. Behind her, Eva watched through the screen door, arms crossed, expression unreadable. "You did all this before they even came for you," she said. "I had to," Miranda replied. "People like them. They don't need reasons to erase you, just the chance." Eva nodded slowly. "So what now?" Miranda didn't turn around. "Now I vanish. Let them think I've surrendered. Let them enjoy their kingdom. And when they least expect it." Miranda opened her eyes, the wind catching her voice just enough to carry. "I take back the crown." From the quiet of the beach house, Miranda watched it all begin to crack. It started with a headline, small, unassuming, buried 3 scrolls deep on a tech blog Eva monitored for corporate whispers. Hale Strategic unveils rebranded infrastructure system, Helix Core. A harmless PR move on the surface, but to Miranda it wasn't just a rebrand, it was the match. Colby had changed the name. He renamed the system. Her system. She stared at the article while Eva sat at the breakfast table, chewing slowly, eyes narrowed at the screen like it had insulted her personally. "You seeing what I'm seeing?" she asked. Miranda nodded once. That name change triggered something. A clause buried deep in the original licensing agreement. A clause she'd written years ago, never disclosed, never flagged. If the system name was altered without written notice to the original licensee, the proprietary rights would automatically revert. In other words, by renaming the software, Colby had handed her the legal keys to everything. Eva grinned, low and wolfish. He just nuked his own house. Miranda didn't smile. She reached for her coffee, eyes never leaving the screen. And he doesn't even know it yet. The next few days unfolded like slow-motion chaos. From their hidden vantage point, Miranda and Ava watched Hale Strategic stumble. Internal chatter grew louder. A junior engineer posted anonymously on a tech forum, asking if anyone had access to archive deployment logs for Miranda's cloud framework. It was quickly deleted, but not before Eva screen captured it. Then came the city contract, Miranda's last big negotiation before she was cut loose. The infrastructure package was in limbo now. The city had questions. Why was the source code inaccessible? Who had final control? Hale Strategic's answers were vague, contradictory. And Miranda, she was nowhere. To them, at least. Every move she made now was through Eva's channels. Every inquiry, every request, routed through legal proxies, corporate shells. She wasn't hiding out of fear. She was camouflaging with intent. On the fourth day, another headline appeared, this time in Tech Courier, a respected industry outlet. Concerns over IP integrity surface amid Hale Strategic's Helix Core launch. Colby was quoted, sounding confident, smug even. "It's a new era for our company," he said. "Helix Core represents innovation beyond any single contributor." Miranda raised an eyebrow. "Beyond any single contributor?" Eva nearly choked on her tea. "He's erasing you in public. Bold move for someone sitting on stolen code." "They always do that right before the crash," Miranda murmured. And the crash came sooner than expected. An internal memo was leaked. Eva's contact inside legal sent it in encrypted form. The message was brief. "Licensing verification in progress. Delays expected. Flagged clause requires immediate review." Miranda read it twice, then leaned back in her chair. The clause had been triggered. Colby had walked right into it. And the legal team, likely trying to backdate approvals, couldn't trace a valid signature for the name change. Not from her, not from any holder of the original rights, because it didn't exist, because she never gave it. "This is just the beginning," Ava said, already tapping away at her laptop. "Once the city pulls out of the infrastructure deal, the stock will take a hit." Miranda didn't answer. She was watching the ocean again, the waves folding like slow breath. Her silence wasn't hesitation, it was calculation. They thought removing her had wiped the slate clean, that if they deleted her name from the pitch decks, changed the logo, smiled on camera, they could own the work. But smoke without fire still chokes, and now the smoke was seeping in through the cracks. It started as whispers, harmless enough to be ignored. An anonymous comment on an employee review site claimed Hale Strategic's leadership was woefully unprepared for enterprise-grade transitions. Another user posted on a private tech Slack channel, "Has anyone seen Colby try to answer a technical question without Googling it under the table?" Eva forwarded the links to Miranda without a word. Then came the leak, a short clip, grainy but clear enough. Security footage from inside the Hale Strategic boardroom, time-stamped 2 days ago. Eva played it back 3 times just to be sure. Patrick Hale stood at the head of the table, red-faced, hand slamming against the wood. "You begged me to let you lead," he shouted, voice shaking, "and now this company's bleeding in front of the entire market." Colby across from him, arms crossed, eyes down. "I didn't know about the clause," he muttered. "You didn't know?" Patrick stepped forward, venom curling in his voice. "You mean to tell me you let your sister outsmart you from the goddamn grave?" The room went silent in the video. Colby didn't reply. Patrick turned away, muttering as he grabbed his drink, but the mic in the room caught it clearly. "She was always sharper than you. You just had a louder mouth." Eva hit pause. She didn't look away from the screen. "That's the moment," she said. "That's the fracture." Miranda sat across from her, fingers laced under her chin, her expression unreadable. "That clip'll make the rounds," Eva continued. "Board members love a weakness at the top. And a quote like that, it spreads like wildfire." Miranda didn't speak because she didn't need to. The momentum was shifting. 2 more internal memos surfaced by the end of the day, one from HR expressing concern over growing discontent among mid-level management, the other from the operations director bluntly stating that technical oversight since the transition has been lacking. And then came the email. It was buried in an archived folder on a cloud account Eva had hacked months ago, an old conversation chain between Miranda's grandfather, Charles Hale, and his personal attorney. Eva opened the file, skimmed it once, then froze. Her eyes scanned the screen again, faster this time, her fingers hovering over the keyboard. "Miranda," she said slowly, "you need to read this." She turned the laptop around. It wasn't just a conversation, it was a draft, a legal clause. a dormant contingency embedded in the original family trust. Written over a decade ago, back when Charles Hale still attended board meetings and still believed one of his grandchildren would carry the legacy without burning it to the ground. The clause was simple on paper but devastating in power. If 3 ethical breaches occurred within the company's executive leadership, fraud, labour abuse or misuse of charitable funds, the silent controlling shares held by the family trust would automatically revert to a pre-named heir, one approved by Charles himself. Not the board, not Patrick, the name on the document, Miranda Elizabeth Hale. Eva looked up. You weren't just the better strategist, you were always the contingency plan. Miranda blinked slowly, the weight of it settling in like the sea at low tide. He never told me, she murmured. He didn't have to, Ava said. He saw them for what they were, and he saw you for what you are. Miranda reached for the laptop, scrolling through the old signature lines. Charles, the attorney, even Patrick. They'd all signed it, years ago, probably thinking it was another routine form in a stack of trust paperwork. They never read it, she whispered. Eva nodded. No one ever reads the fine print. Silence stretched between them. Then Miranda straightened her shoulders. How fast can we verify this with the legal team? I'll have Leonard review it by morning. And if it's valid? Then you don't just own the algorithm, Ava said, voice low. You own the company. Miranda looked out the window again. The ocean hadn't changed, but everything else had. The study smelled faintly of old cedar and ocean salt, a blend that Miranda had grown to associate with clarity. The folder in front of her was thick, red rubber-banded and unassuming, but inside it lived every rotten root of the empire that once bore her name. She opened it. Eva had organised the documents chronologically, neatly labelled, tabbed and cross-referenced. Miranda flipped through the first section, internal reimbursements labelled as outreach consulting, covering first-class flights to private islands. The justification, site inspections for offshore development. The real use, Marlon's birthday yacht trip, masked as a logistics check. She kept reading. A separate invoice trail tied to the Hale Family Foundation caught her attention. Donations meant for disaster relief had been rerouted, quietly funneled into a shell company, and used to renovate Colby's vacation cabin in the Rockies. Another file showed a vendor payment for a diversity training program, but the recipient was a DJ who had played Patrick's anniversary gala. Each page made her colder. This wasn't just sloppy accounting, it was systemic rot, woven into the culture, disguised with elegant wording and deliberate ambiguity. A kingdom built on exploitation, dressed up in corporate polish. She turned to the labour audits. The numbers didn't lie. Entry-level engineers clocked 40-hour weeks on paper, but the internal communications showed mandatory volunteer weekends during product launches. No overtime, no benefits, just coercion and fear of replacement. Then came the emails, forwarded by Eva through secure channels. Exchanges between board members, laughing about skirting wage laws under the guise of mentorship programs. One thread in particular made Miranda grip the edge of the desk. Colby. If they want job security, they can learn to code faster. Otherwise, they're just noise. Why, Patrick, don't say that over email, for God's sake. Miranda closed the file for a moment, letting her pulse settle. The storm wasn't just professional, it was personal. She had given her life to this company, its vision, its people. She remembered the intern she mentored for months, only to learn later he'd been let go without severance. She remembered the tech lead who quietly left after reporting Colby for harassment, his complaint mysteriously lost in admin error. This was the cost of silence, and now she had the receipts. Eva walked in holding 2 small devices, a compact scanner and a fingerprint reader. You ready for the twist? She asked, setting them down. Miranda raised an eyebrow. What now? Eva opened one of the early documents, the disaster relief shell transfer. She slid it beneath the scanner, then tapped the bottom corner where the signature lay. Ink, she said, signed in person. She ran the portable scanner across the signature, then tapped the fingerprint reader. After a beat, the screen lit green. Patrick Hale, right thumb, Ava confirmed. Miranda stared. You embedded biometric verification? Eva nodded. Started 3 years ago. Quiet pilot program. I never told them. She moved to another file, Colby's fake training invoice. Same process. Another green flash. Colby. Index finger. Miranda leaned back. This wasn't just evidence. It was irrefutable. You realise what this means, she said. Eva nodded. It's not circumstantial. It's not hearsay. It's provable intent. SEC can't ignore it. Miranda closed the folder slowly, the weight of what she held pressing into her palms. This isn't about burning them down, she said. It's about showing the world they lit the match. Eva met her eyes. So we file it? Miranda didn't hesitate. We file everything. The night Miranda submitted the report, the house was silent, save for the low hum of Eva's laptop fan and the occasional soft crash of waves beyond the windows. The red folder lay open on the kitchen island, documents neatly stacked, every signature and fingerprint scanned and catalogued. A ghost of the empire her family once paraded, now distilled into proof of their rot. Eva sat across from her, typing quickly, navigating the encrypted portal they'd agreed upon weeks ago. No identifying metadata, no IP traceable to Miranda. The report would be filed anonymously, just one more voice in the dark, tipping off the right authorities. You sure? Eva asked without looking up. Miranda nodded. Let's begin. The upload took 12 minutes. Eva narrated each step like a ritual. Main complaint, fraudulent misuse of non-profit funds, evidence attached, supporting documentation on labour code violations, evidence attached, names redacted, except for Colby and Patrick. She glanced at Miranda. We're not protecting them? They never protected anyone, Miranda said simply. Eva hit submit. The file vanished into a secure system routed through 2 overseas servers. Gone, yet very much alive. Miranda sat back and closed her eyes. Not relief. Not triumph. Just the slow release of breath she hadn't realised she'd been holding since the first night they tried to erase her. By morning, the response had begun. The Securities and Exchange Commission didn't waste time. An automated reply hit the burner email. Your report has been received and is under active review. Eva leaned over the laptop. They flagged it for priority, too much attached documentation to ignore. By noon, multiple company accounts linked to Hale Strategic's operational budget were temporarily frozen, pending clarification of fund usage and contractual integrity. It wasn't a public move, not yet. But inside the walls of Hale HQ, the pressure was building. The following day, it spilled into daylight. Miranda was in the study, reorganising her old files, when Eva walked in holding her phone aloft. Turn on the TV. Miranda raised an eyebrow. Now, Eva said, flipping to a live stream news segment. The anchor's voice was calm, measured, but carried the unmistakable tension of breaking news. Sources confirm that federal regulators have launched a formal investigation into Hale Strategic following an anonymous whistleblower complaint. Allegations include financial misappropriation of charitable funds, labour code violations, and potential misrepresentation of proprietary technology. The screen cut to footage of the Hale headquarters. Sleek glass, employees in suits rushing past reporters. Then came the graphic, bold and damning. Family tech empire faces federal probe. Miranda watched, expression unreadable. Eva dropped onto the couch beside her. It's out. For a long time, neither of them spoke. Eventually, Miranda said, They don't know it's me. No, Eva agreed, and that's what's killing them. Inside the company, panic took hold like a virus. Leaked messages from its internal Slack channels hit tech Twitter before noon. Managers begging for clarification, HR fielding anonymous questions about severance protections, legal teams scrambling for documents they'd long buried. And Colby was suddenly silent. No posts, no interviews, no public defence. Patrick released a statement that afternoon, carefully worded and painfully vague. We are cooperating fully with federal inquiries and stand behind the integrity of our leadership. It reeked of desperation. Eva showed Miranda the comments beneath the statement. Memes, call-outs, are now viral side by side of Colby, holding a champagne glass next to the headline about labour abuse. The internet had turned. Still, Miranda didn't gloat. She didn't refresh the news every 5 minutes. She didn't open the texts from old colleagues suddenly flooding her backup phone. She went for a walk, down the beach barefoot, the wet sand pulling gently at her heels with every step. The sky above was soft with overcast light, the kind that made the world feel quieter, more honest. The sea was calm, still moving, but slow, measured. She let the wind tangle her hair, let the salt cling to her skin. This wasn't the end. This wasn't closure. It was disruption, the kind that made space for something else. When she returned to the house, Eva had left a mug of coffee warming on the counter. A note beside it read, "Not over yet." But damn, that was satisfying. Miranda smiled just once, quiet, sharp, the kind of smile you save for storms you no longer fear. The knock came just after dusk. Miranda was on the porch, a blanket draped over her shoulders, cradling a cup of tea gone lukewarm. The horizon was painted in slate and fire, the sea calm as if it too was holding its breath. She didn't flinch at the sound, just turned her head slowly towards the front door. 3 knocks, even deliberate, not Eva. She rose, walked barefoot across the warm wood floors, and opened the door. Marlon stood there. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair tousled like he'd driven straight from a breakdown. His suit was wrinkled, the collar slightly damp from sweat or rain, maybe both. He wasn't carrying anything, no bag, no pretense. "Miranda," he said, voice cracking. She didn't speak, he hesitated. I didn't know where else to go." Still, she said nothing. "I thought maybe—" He trailed off, looked down at the porch floor like it might give him a script. "Can we talk?" She stepped aside. He entered the foyer like someone entering a church, hatless and guilty, unsure if he was welcome. The silence wrapped around him, not cold but absolute. They ended up in the kitchen. Miranda poured him tea, slid the mug across the counter without a word. He caught it mid-slide, hands trembling slightly. For a while the only sounds were the ticking wall clock and the distant rhythm of waves. He was the first to break. "She left," he said quietly. "Kendra, the woman I remember," Miranda said, her voice calm. "She said she couldn't handle the attention. The press said I was toxic by association." He gave a bitter laugh. "The same day the investigation hit the news, she was gone. Took everything." Miranda folded her arms across her chest. "I didn't expect sympathy," he added quickly. "You wanted a soft place to land," she finished for him. He didn't deny it. "I made a mistake," he said. Miranda tilted her head slightly, studying him. "No," she replied, "you made a choice. And now you're dealing with the return on that investment." Marlon winced. "You're right, I deserve that." He glanced around the kitchen, clean, minimal, untouched by chaos. His gaze lingered on the edges, the small signs of a life deliberately constructed. "I didn't think you'd make it without them," he admitted. "Without the firm, your family." She stepped closer, voice soft but unyielding. "That's because you never saw me. You saw proximity to power. You thought I was the echo, not the voice." His eyes flicked up to hers. "I know better now," he said. "I see it." "No," she said again. "You see the fallout. That's not the same thing." Silence fell again. Then she dropped the final card. "I knew she'd leave you." Marlon froze. "What?" "I predicted it. The moment I walked out that night and you didn't follow, just stood there smug with that envelope in your hand. I knew." His mouth opened, closed. Miranda's tone didn't change. "I told Eva 3 days later he'll be back alone. The woman he traded me for doesn't know how to weather storms, only pose in sunlight." Marlon's face crumpled. Not with tears. He didn't have enough shame for that. But with the realization that Miranda hadn't just survived, she'd seen the whole arc before it happened. He reached out, fingers brushing the counter. "I miss the version of you that used to believe in me," he said quietly. Miranda stepped back. "She's gone," she said. "You buried her the night you joined their silence." She didn't raise her voice, didn't need to. And when Marlon finally left, walking down the driveway in the soft wash of moonlight, she didn't watch from the window. Ghosts didn't chase the living. The door clicked shut behind Marlon with a soft finality. Miranda stood in the hallway for a long moment, one hand resting lightly on the frame, not in hesitation but in affirmation. She didn't feel triumph, she didn't feel rage, she just felt finished. Not with him. She'd been done with Marlon the night he handed her that envelope like it was a receipt, but with the weight she'd been unknowingly carrying. The version of her that still lingered in memory, clinging to a love that was never mutual, had finally exhaled. She walked back into the kitchen, the mug he barely touched still warm on the counter. She poured the contents into the sink, rinsed it clean, and placed it carefully on the drying rack, each motion deliberate, unemotional. Eva had once told her, "Closure isn't loud, it's clean." And this was clean. She moved through the house slowly, not because she was tired, but because something inside her was recalibrating. Her gaze caught on small things, a worn spine of a book she once read aloud on stormy nights, a candle burned halfway down to the glass, an old woven throw folded precisely on the edge of the couch. Things that had nothing to do with Marlon, things that were hers. She went into the study to file away the evening in her mind and in her notes, but something stopped her just before she closed the drawer. A glint of bronze tucked in the back, half hidden beneath a stack of old business cards and a leather-bound journal. She reached in and pulled it out. A keychain, simple, tarnished, the once polished metal now dulled with time. Hanging from it, a small lighthouse charm. She turned it over, brushing off the dust with her thumb. Etched into the back in tiny script were their initials, M+M, surrounded by a heart so shallowly engraved it was barely visible now. She remembered when he gave it to her, their first apartment, their first joint lease, the way he handed it to her with pride, saying, "This is our start." She hadn't thought about it in years. Miranda held it in her palm, not tightly, but with the gentleness one gives to something already broken. It was lighter than she remembered, or maybe she was stronger now. She walked outside. The beach was quiet, the moon high and full, casting silver shadows along the sand. The tide was low, the sea stretched out like an open page, waiting. She stepped off the porch, barefoot again, the cool sand sifting between her toes. The lighthouse charm swayed in her hand, clinking softly against the brass ring. She didn't say a word, didn't speak to the wind or whisper a goodbye. She walked to the edge of the surf, let the foam brush her ankles, and then gently opened her hand. The keychain sat on her palm like an artifact from a life she no longer belonged to. And then, without ceremony, she let it fall. The metal made no sound as it disappeared into the shallows, swept away like it had never existed. No anger, no grief, just release. She stood there for a while longer, breathing in the salt air, watching the tide pull back and forth. Each wave felt like a quiet promise. "You're not that woman anymore." And she wasn't. She turned, walking slowly back towards the house. Not to escape the past, but to step into something entirely her own. The ghost was gone, and Miranda Hale was fully, finally here. The file was thicker than Miranda expected. Eva placed it on the kitchen table with a reverence usually reserved for old photographs or dangerous truths. The word contingency was handwritten on the front tab, in a script Miranda hadn't seen in years, steady, slanted, deliberate. Her grandfather's handwriting. She sat slowly, fingers brushing over the letters before she opened it. The first page was legal formality. Trust Amendment numbered 7, dated 11 years ago. It had passed through the family attorney, notarised and co-signed by each member of the board, Patrick, Colby, even Miranda herself. She flipped further. That's when it appeared. A clause nestled deep within a series of updates, innocuous to anyone not reading carefully. Eva leaned over and pointed. "Here." Miranda followed her finger. In the event that the leadership of Hale Strategic is found to have violated 3 or more core ethical principles, defined herein as 1. Misuse of charitable funds, 2. Willful labour exploitation, and 3. Fraudulent financial reporting, then all dormant controlling shares held in the family trust shall transfer to the individual designated in Addendum A with immediate effect. Miranda blinked. Dormant shares? Silent stock, Ava explained, held in trust to avoid public scrutiny. Your grandfather kept them under the radar, legal but off the books in public filings. An Addendum A? Miranda asked, though she already had a sinking feeling. Eva flipped 3 more pages, and there it was, Addendum A, beneficiary of emergency transfer clause, Miranda Elizabeth Hale, her name, written in Charles Hale's pen, initialed, dated, stamped. Eva exhaled slowly. He never trusted them. Miranda's mind reeled backward. She remembered the night Charles handed her a sealed envelope over dinner, years ago, before his health had begun to decline. "Hold on to this," he'd said, "not because I don't trust them, but because I know what they're capable of." She hadn't opened it then. He'd died 6 months later. The envelope was buried in a drawer, forgotten in grief and business and life. But now, staring at the clause, it all made sense. "He built a back door," she whispered. Eva nodded. "And they signed it, all of them." Miranda scanned the signature page. Colby's name, bold and messy. Patrick's, precise but rushed. Her own, calm and even. "They thought it was boilerplate," she said. "Just another trust revision." Eva smirked. "They never read the fine print." Miranda leaned back in her chair, hands folded on her lap, trying to process the enormity of what this meant. She wasn't just the moral heir. She was the legal one, and everything, every asset, every voting share, every decision was hers now, if she claimed it. "If I file this," she said slowly, "it won't just remove them. It'll transfer power overnight." Ava nodded. "No court battle, no press conference. It's built into the trust structure, a trigger clause. As soon as the federal investigation became public, the third condition was met." Miranda stared out the window. The sky was clear, sharp against the Atlantic blue. The air smelled of salt and cedar and something new. Possibility. "What if I don't want it?" she asked quietly. Eva didn't answer at first. Then she said, "Then it'll sit, unclaimed, and someone else will find a way to weaponize it." Miranda's jaw clenched slightly. She didn't crave revenge, but this wasn't revenge, it was restoration. "I don't need a throne," she said. Eva stepped forward, placing a hand gently on Miranda's shoulder. "No," she agreed, "but you deserve the keys to the kingdom they tried to bury you under." Miranda looked down at the clause again. All these years, her family had built a legacy of power by erasing, manipulating, and silencing those who got in their way. And now the fine print had come back to rewrite the story, not with noise, but with absolute surgical precision. She stood slowly, the page still in her hand. "Call Leonard," she said. "I want the transfer filed before the end of the week." Eva smiled. "Already ahead of you." The law office hadn't changed. Same glass doors, same expensive silence. The receptionist looked up with a practised smile that flickered slightly when she recognised Miranda's name. "Mr. Leonard will be right with you," she said. Miranda nodded and took a seat. She didn't need water. She didn't want small talk. Her bag sat beside her, zippered tight around documents that would either rewrite her family's legacy or confirm what she already knew. It was hers all along. A few minutes later, the door opened. "Miss Hale," said a voice from within. "Come in, Mr." Leonard looked older than she remembered. His once dark hair now fully grey, his posture a bit more stooped, but his eyes were still sharp, still reading 3 moves ahead. They shook hands briefly before Miranda took the seat across from his wide oak desk. "I have a file I need you to review," she said without preamble. "It concerns a clause my grandfather wrote into the Hale Trust." Leonard didn't blink. "Eva sent me a digital scan yesterday." Of course she had. "I've reviewed it," he continued. "Cross-checked it with the original trust filing, the amendment logs, and the signature authentication." He opened a drawer and pulled out a leather-bound folder, the same kind Miranda had seen him use for settlements and succession documents. "The clause is valid." Miranda exhaled once. Not relief, more like confirmation of a storm forecast she already believed. "You understand what it activates," she said. Leonard gave a small nod. "Yes. Upon breach of 3 outlined ethical conditions, each of which, based on the SEC filing, appears satisfied, the dormant shares held in the trust are immediately and legally transferred to the designated heir." He slid a single sheet across the desk. A summary document, simple, brutal. "And the designated heir," he added, "is you." Miranda glanced over the page. She knew the contents, but seeing it printed, legal and binding, was something else entirely. "This won't require board approval?" she asked. "No," Leonard replied. "The structure your grandfather built was intentionally insulated. Once activated, the shares transfer automatically. They now constitute majority voting control." "And Patrick? Colby?" Leonard allowed a pause before answering. They will be notified after the transfer is complete. There's no legal mechanism for reversal. Miranda sat back. No war, no press, no courtroom battle, just a silent surgical shift of power, exactly the way her grandfather would have wanted. She signed the necessary documents without hesitation. Leonard stamped and notarized them in silence. Then he made the call. A courier was dispatched with the transfer paperwork. The Registrar of Corporate Control would file the change within 48 hours. By the time her family saw the shift, the ink would be dry, the deed irreversible. Miranda left the office without saying much more. There was no need. Everything that needed to be said had been written years ago, in ink, in fingerprints, in clauses no one had bothered to read. She drove back in silence, the road unfolding like a ribbon between then and now. At the house, Eva was waiting on the porch with a glass of wine in hand. Miranda stepped out of the car, expression calm. "It's done," she said. Eva didn't cheer, didn't smirk. She just offered the glass. Miranda took it, sipped, and let the silence settle around them. Inside, the evening passed without fanfare. No announcements, no news blasts. Just the sound of waves brushing the shore and the occasional buzz of Eva's laptop as final confirmations arrived. By midnight, it was official. Miranda Hale now held controlling interest in Hale Strategic. She sat by the window with the folder in her lap, not to gloat, but to remember every loss, every insult, every time they made her feel small. And now she was the architect of their undoing, not through vengeance, through precision. She didn't need to yell. She had the claws, and the power that came with it spoke louder than any voice ever could. The elevator ride was silent. Miranda stood alone, watching her reflection in the mirrored walls, composed, precise, unshakable. Her suit was charcoal grey, crisp and understated. No dramatic red, no power jewellery. Just a woman who had come to claim what was always hers. The doors opened on the 36th floor, revealing the hallway that led to the executive boardroom. She stepped onto the polished marble, her heels striking clean, even notes into the space. She didn't pause, didn't knock. Inside the boardroom buzzed with quiet conversation. Patrick sat at the head of the table, nursing a black coffee. Colby leaned against the far wall, scrolling through his phone like the room didn't matter. Until Miranda walked in. The silence fell immediately. A few chairs shifted. Someone gasped softly. One junior executive nearly stood up, then thought better of it. Patrick's eyes narrowed. "What the hell are you doing here?" Miranda didn't answer. She walked to the chair at the head of the table, the one they never once offered her in 2 decades. The one that had always been reserved for real leadership. She pulled it out, sat down, and folded her hands on the tabletop. Across from her, Colby's jaw dropped. Patrick rose slowly, as if affronted. "Miranda, this isn't your meeting. We have—" "It is now," she said, voice calm. From the corner of the room, the Assistant General Counsel stepped forward, holding a slim leather folder. Without a word, she slid it across the table towards Patrick. He opened it, read. His face paled. "No," he muttered. This isn't possible." Colby leaned over his father's shoulder to read, confusion turning to panic. "That clause was buried. How did—" Miranda simply tapped the desk once. A second assistant entered, carrying a polished brass nameplate. He walked to the head of the table, lifted the old plaque, Patrick Hale, founder and chairman, and replaced it with the new one. Miranda Hale, Chairwoman. The brass caught the overhead light, glinting like a quiet coronation. Patrick stared at it like it might bite him. "You can't just—" "I didn't just," Miranda said, voice level. "This transfer has been legally executed. The registrar filed it 48 hours ago. You've all received the updated shareholder communication. You just didn't read it in time." Colby stepped forward, voice rising. "This is a coup." Miranda met his eyes. "No, a coup requires force. This was a clause, in a document you signed." He opened his mouth to protest, but the assistant counsel cut in. "The transfer is valid. The ethics trigger was met. 3 confirmed breaches, SEC acknowledgement, and the clause, as written, was triggered automatically." Patrick slumped back in his chair, stunned. The other board members, previously silent, began to murmur, some checking their tablets, others just watching Miranda with dawning realisation. She looked around the room, each face one she'd once stood behind. Now they were forced to face her. "Let me be clear," she said, her voice slicing through the room. "I'm not here to punish anyone. I'm here to fix what you all let rot." No one interrupted. "Effective immediately, I'll be assuming full executive authority. Anyone with a conflict of interest or a desire to resign is welcome to do so quietly. I won't stop you." She let the silence expand again. No one moved. Then she stood, lifted the nameplate briefly in her hands and looked at it, not with pride but with certainty. "They never gave me a seat," she said quietly, "so I built my own." She set the nameplate back in place and turned to leave. No applause, no handshake, just the soft echo of her footsteps down the corridor, the sound of a ghost reclaiming the house that once buried her. There was no party, no press release, no champagne cork echoing off the high-rise walls, no speeches about triumph. Miranda didn't want them. She didn't need them. Instead, she spent the following days inside the bones of the company, where the rot had been hiding, not just in the boardroom, but in the departments where overworked analysts whispered warnings no one heard, in HR logs full of buried complaints, and in the fine print of vendor contracts deliberately misinterpreted for years. She called quiet meetings, one-on-one sessions, no cameras, no grand entrances. She brought in auditors, independent, unbought. She restructured the pay scales, restored benefits, reached out to the interns who were pushed out and the employees who had left in silence. Many returned, not out of loyalty, but because something had changed. She never mentioned Colby or Patrick by name. She didn't need to. Their absence spoke louder than her presence. Where once she was erased, now she was undeniable, not feared, not worshipped, trusted. In the old CEO's office, she found the photos still on the walls, framed magazine covers of Patrick shaking hands with governors, Colby holding awards he never earned. She didn't take them down in anger. She simply boxed them, one by one, and stored them in the archives with the rest of the obsolete files. When asked what she wanted done with them, she said, "Let them collect dust. That's where they belong." She didn't fire for revenge. She let performance speak. She didn't reward for loyalty. She rewarded merit. Slowly the company began to shift, not with noise, but with momentum, like a ship turning, not because it's lost, but because it's finally correcting course. By the end of her first month, quarterly projections stabilised. Legal risks decreased. A quiet article appeared in a business journal titled "The Quiet Rebuild: How Hale Strategic Survived Itself." She didn't comment, because Miranda Hale wasn't interested in redemption arcs. She was interested in integrity, and after ensuring that every broken policy had been rewritten and every shadowed corner lit up, she returned home. The beach house hadn't changed. Same wind sweeping in from the sea, same boards creaking beneath her bare feet. She walked through the doorway, set her keys on the hook, and breathed. For the first time, the air didn't taste like tension. It tasted like salt and freedom. She moved through the house slowly, taking in each room, not as a visitor, not as someone in hiding, as someone who had survived. The sky outside was painted with dusk, the ocean endless and patient. She stepped out onto the back deck. No tablet, no phone, just her and the horizon. The sea was calm again, the tide low, its pull gentle, the kind of quiet that didn't beg to be filled, the kind she had always carried, misunderstood, misread. She leaned against the railing. She wasn't thinking about Patrick's stunned silence or Colby's retreat, or the way the boardroom had shifted under her words. She was thinking about the little girl who once sat at the end of that same boardroom table, told to take notes while the men made decisions. The one who'd grown up believing that obedience earned respect. That silence was weakness. That value was assigned, not owned. They had trained her to sit at the edges, so she built a structure without them. And when the structure held, she filled it with something stronger, not vengeance, purpose. Behind her, the house hummed in stillness. Ahead of her, the sea whispered its own kind of applause. She closed her eyes, let the wind pull through her hair, let the weight fall. She had taken the beatings, she had taken the silence, And still she had arrived, not to prove them wrong, to prove herself right. She opened her eyes again, looked out across the silver-blue stretch of water, and whispered to no one but the waves. They never gave me a seat, so I built my own table